Hello, so let's look at this function. So first of all, I should talk about the name. It doesn't stand for underground resistance. Well, in other contexts it would, but here it stands for, well, actually, I think this isn't quite right, but what I thought meant as a kind of prefix in German was kind of higher, like something that's above. Um, and so what it actually means is a function for making patterns of patterns. So you can take a few patterns, well, as many as you like, and then make a pattern of using them. I've since been told, I think, by native German speakers that that isn't the case, but yeah, maybe there's a better name for it. The good thing is it's nice and short. It's always good to have short function names, but it's even better if they mean something. So apologies to German speakers if I've got that wrong. Anyway, we can make up our own language. So this is something it uses. You can see it's got some different patterns here, and they're named, and it's putting it into another pattern here. Before I explain this in any more depth, let's just listen to it for a bit. Okay, so you can hear that there's quite a lot of going in and out with the different patterns. They're kind of ordered in a certain way. So let's take this apart and see how it works. So it starts off with this little rhythm, but it gives it a name. So it calls it BDSD. And then let's put the same name here. And then it's got another list, which I'll talk about shortly. So that should be working. Yeah. Oops. So what's going on? So this is the pattern, and I'm giving it a name, BDSD. I could have called it something else like Penelope, or something, but I've just called it BDSD because it's got a kick drum and a snare drum in. You can call them whatever you like, obviously. So I've said that this repeats every 16 cycles, but actually there's nothing changing within those 16 cycles, and that's just playing. So if I did something like this, so let's say it should repeat every 2 cycles, then every other cycle would be silent. So there you go. So what happens if we want to make that a bit more interesting? Let's add in those claps. I won't bother typing that all in. Let's just put it in. So now we have 2 different patterns named, one called BDSD and one called claps. So they're a list of patterns. So that's when you see the square brackets around, that's the list starting and ending. And then you also see commas, that's going in between each element of the list. So the first one is here, in parenthesis, in double quotes is its name. This isn't mini notation, it's just what's called a string in programming, but it's just like a word within double quotes. And then another comma here to separate the name from the pattern. So that's it. That's the named pattern, its name and what the pattern is. BDSD, BDSD. And then there's another one here, which again has a word here, which is its name, called claps. And then a slightly more complicated pattern. But it's not that complicated. It's got a couple of claps here and a few more there, and then some effects added. I'm using delay time, delay feedback to add a bit of an echo to the claps. And then I'm running that. So let's put the claps in here. So there's 2 cycles, and the first one is BDSD, and the second one is claps. Let's make it a bit longer. Let's make it 4 cycles long. That means that it doesn't mean anything speeds up. Nothing goes up in pitch or anything. They all sound the same. It's just that now the claps are over 2 cycles, and the BDSD is also over 2 cycles. So however many they are is spread equally over this pattern of patterns. So this is the pattern that stands in for this, and this is the pattern name that stands in for this. Oh, actually all of that. Okay, so that's the basics of it really. It's just a way of making a pattern. This is a pattern of patterns. So it's kind of a meta pattern. Yeah, I keep saying because I'm unsure what to say next, and then realizing it's the name of the function, which is confusing. Sorry about that. So where there's a rest, it's just silent. All right, let's add a third one. There. So now I can start making this a bit more complicated. So let's have it so the bass line is always on. So I'm using this square brackets thing in the MIDI notation. You remember that lets you have more than one sub pattern, and it'll layer them on top. So I've got a comma here separating the BDSD claps bit from the bass bit. So the bass line's always running, but the other sub pattern, it's alternating between BDSD and claps. Right, there's a little technicality here which also applies to the sec-p loop thing I showed a couple of videos ago. And that is something you might have noticed. I'm specifying an orbit here. So orbits are to do, in this case, well, they're to do with routing audio around. So normally D1 would automatically go to the first orbit. D2 would automatically go to the second orbit, and so on, which means that D1 and D2 and all the others up to 12, I think, have a separate orbit, which means that they have separate global effects. So there's a metaphor getting extended here around global effects and orbits. So if you think about planets, that might help, or it might just confuse you. But so basically an orbit is kind of audio that gets can be routed in different ways, but what we're worried about here is that a different orbit will have different effects units that are global. to that orbit. So, for example, here speed is an effect, but each sound has its own speed. But delay is an effect where all of the sounds on the sharing the same orbit have the same delay effect, which means that two sounds can't have different delays going on at the same time, because all of the sounds going into that orbit will go through that same delay unit and have the same parameters set. So where I'm setting, for example, the delay time, which is the amount of time between each echo in the delay. Here I've got T, which stands for a third. I could change that to a quarter or alternate between them, that's fine. But it can only be one value at any one time, because there's only one delay effect per orbit. And the confusing thing here, which I'm getting around to, is that all of the separate patterns end up going to D1, which means they'd all go to the same orbit and would all only be able to have one value per effect. Maybe it's easier if I show an example like with stack. So a couple of videos ago I showed you stack, and it lets you simply play more than one pattern at once. So if I use a room effect, it would be the same with delay, but it's more obvious with reverb, with the room reverb effect. So when I'm running that, you can hear the delays working. It didn't work then. And that's because the BD doesn't have a room set. And in fact, if I put room 0 here, it would get... Well, sometimes the clap just seems to win all the time. But basically, either everything goes into the same reverb effect. So when I set room to something really high, then the BD will be affected as well. Maybe if I have something a bit sort of on the same. So you can hear that off sound is going into the reverb, even though I've set it to 0. And the solution to that would be to put that on its own orbit. So if I put that on 4, that should be on orbit 0, I think. And that good one. So then you could probably hear that the off sound is no longer going into the reverb unit. So that's to make a long story short. That's what I'm doing here. Actually, it was just a long story, wasn't it? So I've put the orbit on channel 4, so that the delay here wouldn't affect any of the other patterns in this structure. Okay. Got there in the end. So there we go. So the only other thing to explain is this last list that I didn't, I kind of glossed over. It has to be there. But for this, it's just empty. There's nothing in there. But in this example, there is a named function, in this case, an effect. So this is quite handy, actually. So if I did, let's call it a function called, I don't know, chop rev, because I want to chop up and reverse some part of this pattern. Then I can do chop8 dot rev. So I showed you dot in the last video for composing functions together. So now chop rev is both chopping up the sound, let's make it even more extreme, and reversing it. So that won't have any effect straight away, but if I, for example, do a colon here, and then chop rev, then that pattern will now have this function applied. That sounds kind of awesome. So if I do this now, it'll alternate between the unfunctioned bass and the functioned bass, if that makes sense. Interesting. And again, I can add some more ones here. So this example I've got here using an effect. So let's take that. Crunch. And let's put that on the BDSD. Crunch. Okay. So if you were going to use this for making a longer track, you could increase this. So if you wanted to make a track that had 64 cycles in, you could do that and make this a lot more detailed, have things going in and out, having effects applied, being manipulated in different ways, and gradually build up a track. I have actually tried using this live, actually. It's quite nice to make live code from scratch, something that has a kind of verse, chorus structure built into it. The problem is if it's playing the verse and you want to work on the chorus, you can't really hear what you're doing until it comes round. But still, there's definitely some interesting things to explore there. It's not something I've done very often, maybe once or twice. Okay, so that is hope you have fun with that one, and see you soon.